Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronx Net's program. We talk to reporters and writers and editors and filmmakers. And in this case, in the second part of our show, we're going to talk to a executive, so to speak, who runs a book programs here in the Bronx. And I think he's got something coming up that I think you're going to enjoy. But to get started, let's roll up our sleeves. And I have rolled up my sleeves today. And we're going to say hello to the senior state politics reporter for City and State New York, our buddy Rebecca Lewis. Nice to see you, Rebecca.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Are you all recovered from the primary? I know you worked real hard.
Getting there.
All right.
I got to get ready for the general election in November.
I know we'll all be there. Although in the Bronx, it's usually not that exciting because we're pretty much a one-party system here in some ways. Although people running in the 14th council district against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez probably don't agree with that assessment. Nonetheless, so this was interesting. Let's just run through. So Adriano Espaillat, who has a part of the Bronx in his district, won quite handily with 80% of the vote. Jamal Bowman in the 16th CD, which was redistricted, and he only has a small sliver of the Bronx, also won quite handily with, it looked like 90% to 91% of the vote. I'll start here. Alessandra Biaggi, who was a state senator here, took, I think, a risk and ran against an incumbent in a district she hadn't worked on before. Do you think her political career has ended? I mean, because she lost, and now she's going to have to give up her state Senate seat.
It's tough to come back from a lost congressional race, especially when you've given up a seat in another legislature in order to do it. There's probably nothing stopping her from trying to run again in 2 years. We certainly saw in Manhattan, Queens, Serge Patel ran more than one time several years in a row, and he hasn't seen success yet, but he's kept coming back and running for office. So
you think maybe she could run again? It's a fascinating kind of quirk because Natalia Fernandez is a state assembly member. She happened to win her race, but she had no risk because it was on a different ballot. Just a fascinating thing. And I do think that for Senator Biaggi, she's more equipped in her mind to run for Congress because she sees the issues as large issues. I don't think she, was a great constituent server, so to speak, as a state senator. Anyway, much more challenging was the race in the 33rd senatorial district between Gustavo Rivera and Miguelina Camilo. As we well know, the Bronx Democratic Party supported not the incumbent in this case and have a little bit of egg on their face. What do you think played here? Incumbency? Incumbents won pretty much down the line, huh?
It was a good night for incumbents. And I know that it was probably, I believe, the closest race between an incumbent and an insurgent challenger, certainly in the city. I believe
it's 51-46 was this
in the Democratic Party as well. I think there was a pretty close Republican primary upstate on the other side of the aisle. But, it was certainly incumbency definitely helped. But there was a lot of outside spending in that race, a lot of independent expenditures and super PAC spending in opposition to Gustavo Rivera that, at least his campaign said is a big factor of why the race wound up being so close. And obviously the Bronx Democrats, you can't discount the influence that they have, getting people on the ground, volunteers, literature, and as well as Adriano Espaillat, who has had a lot of success recently in getting his candidates elected to various offices, various levels of government. He endorsed Miguelina Camilo, and she was one of 2 candidates for him this time around, and it came up short in both races.
Yeah. We did the debate between the two of them, and she was highly qualified. I make no bones about it. I thought she was very well spoken. But this whole Robert Jackson was not happy with Adriano Espaillat, because here's an incumbent who serves in a an adjacent area, or maybe even part of the same area that Congressman Espaillat serves. I wonder if this race will change some of the, I don't know, imperatives that the Democratic Party sees, that maybe they would evaluate. I don't know, who they like better, or rather than just kind of like couch the politics of it. I mean, this was a big progressive versus moderate elect primary that came up many times. What do you think of that? Of some change now as a result of the way this came down?
I don't know if it's going to have too much of a change. If you look at, for example, like the candidates,
Perhaps.
the candidates that Eric Adams endorsed,
Yes.
the candidates that the incumbents that he endorsed against, for example, were all lawmakers who probably weren't his biggest fans anyway, were lawmakers who probably were not super prone to being his allies in Albany to begin with. He endorsed against a number of progressives. He endorsed for people like Kevin Parker, who are already his allies. The fact that his candidates didn't win means, he's not going to have influence, in Albany. He already doesn't really have much influence, as we've seen. He's got a very a tense relationship with Albany lawmakers, as we've seen in his first year in office. But none of the people that he endorsed against are people that he had really great relationships to begin with. And Adriano Espaillat, he has been showing his hand recently in terms of trying to get candidates that he supports elected. He only got involved in 2 races, so uh, he's not
Well,
really
let's see, and he
alienating
lost both of them.
large. He
Yeah,
did
but
he lost
he
both of
lost
them,
both
but
of those. Yeah.
he did lose both of them. So it's a little bit of a tarnish on his record after some successes in the assembly and the city council. But he very strategically chose his battles, and so his candidates didn't make it to the state senate, but he won his own reelection handily. He still has the candidates that he is connected to in the other levels of government, and he didn't go out of his way
Yeah.
to make enemies of other people.
I
He
look.
really chose his battles.
He's going to be okay. This to me is where this falls, and that's why the 34th senatorial district in the Bronx was fascinating. I think the Democratic Party statewide and really nationally has to come to grips with this progressive versus moderate thing, because rather than see where they're on the same page and say, well, we're all Democrats and we agree on certain fundamental things, just how we're going to handle it, they're at odds, and it's allowed them to split the party. So in the case of Rivera and Jackson's 2 so-called progressives won, Natalia Fernandez, seen as a much more moderate establishment candidate who was supported by the Bronx Democratic Party, also won against somebody who was a quote-unquote progressive Christian Amato. So that to me, it's like you follow it down the line, and all of a sudden there's one of these, and then you got to go back down the line. I'm trying to find trends, but I don't know that I see one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that the Bronx is pretty unique in terms of yeah. So
I do
the
that every
Bronx
week. Yes.
the Bronx is pretty unique in terms of its democratic politics. Certainly, it's the last borough with a really strong democratic machine
Yep.
that's really been able to kind of evolve with the times in ways that other machines haven't been able to, integrating more, quote unquote, progressive voices into the party apparatus compared to some of the other machines in other parts of the city. And I think that we kind of see, it doesn't always work out 100%. Gustavo Rivera, for example, uh, never really got along with the Bronx Party, has always been at odds with them, was at odds with 2 of the 3 last party leaders in the Bronx. But, in the case of someone like Natalia Fernandez, sure, she was backed by county, but she isn't necessarily wasn't seen as a quote unquote moderate per se. She was backed
But
by the
she
party,
was.
sure, but and sure, she was going against Christian Amato, a former Alessandra Biaggi staffer, a
That's right.
self-styled progressive. But that, it kind of comes back to the idea of what is progressive, what is moderate. Can you be progressive and still part of the party apparatus? And you ask someone like Natalia Fernandez, and she'd probably say, yeah, you can still be progressive and
Right.
part of the apparatus. And if you look at who was working on her campaign, New Deal Strategies, for example, they generally work on progressive campaigns, and they
That's
were
right.
working hard for her, even though that she was backed by the Bronx County. So it's there's nuance there, certainly.
Let's just talk before we run out of time about this idea of PACs, political action committees that spent a lot of money, certainly on the Rivera Camillo race. Um, to me, it's very disturbing because you could have big money supporting somebody or pushing somebody that maybe the people don't support, or and they could put out anything they want, whether it's true or not, and distort, and they put stuff out. Is there any chance that as this goes through evaluation, that the state legislature will take a look at this and say, you know what, maybe we ought to ramp down on the amount of money that can be spent?
Well, I don't know how much influence the state legislature can have, given the decision of Citizens United, which really just paved the way
Oh,
for
that's right. You're
super
right.
PACs and
Yes.
corporations spending money. So, I'm sure the legislature would love to crack down on outside spending, but I think that they're probably a little out of their depths, and that's more of an issue for
All right, you're right.
Congress or the
You're
Supreme
right.
Court.
You're right. Do you think that given the rancor, let's say in the Gustavo Rivera race, now that he's a state senator, and Jamal Bailey is going to be sitting in the same body that he is, do you think that they'll be able to get along and they'll just say, well, okay, bygones are bygones? I mean, we're going to talk to Senator Rivera on Bronx Talk next week to find out what he thinks. But the worst thing that could happen out of this is that it gets in the way of passing legislation like the Health Care Act or other things of significant importance.
From all the conversations I've had with both Gustavo Rivera and Jamal Bailey, they both seem to be. They're not taking it personally. They're not viewing it personally. Rivera himself has never been shy about letting it
Anything.
known, yes, about anything, but especially about letting it known when he has a bone to pick with party leadership. And he was, very much Jamal Bailey is someone I get along with. We're friendly. I've spoken
All
with him
right.
about this.
Yep.
Jamal Bailey says it's not personal. We backed Miguelina Camilo, and we decided to keep
Got it.
backing her. So whether or not that's just talk, we'll
We
see.
we got to run. Rebecca Lewis, you're a superstar. We love having you. We love reading what you write in City and State New York. Senior state politics reporter for City and State New York. Rebecca Lewis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll see what happens as we get to November. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about that book thing that's going on in the Bronx. Don't go away.